When Keanu Reeves walked onto the stage of the Steve Harvey Show, the atmosphere was light, warm applause, curious smiles, the usual sparkle of daytime television. People expected charm, maybe a few Hollywood anecdotes, certainly a laugh or two. What they didn't expect was a moment so raw, so human, that even Steve Harvey, the man known for his wit and composure, was left speechless, clutching the crucifix on his chest with tears in his eyes. And it all started with one simple, quiet question. "Can I tell you something I've never said in public?" The studio hushed. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Steve leaned in. "Go ahead." But Keanu didn't rush. He just looked at Steve, not like a celebrity being interviewed, but like a man about to hand over something sacred. The energy shifted. It wasn't just an interview anymore. It was something else. Earlier that day, Steve had introduced Keanu with reverence. "They call him the kindest man in Hollywood," he told the crowd. "But I say he's the realest example of grace I've ever seen." The audience roared. But when Keanu took his seat, something about the way his eyes locked onto the small cross around Steve's neck, you could feel it. Something deeper was coming. The conversation started gently. Talk of humility, kindness, living without armor in a world that demands it. Steve mentioned viral clips of Keanu giving up his subway seat, donating millions to behind-the-scenes workers, helping strangers with no cameras around. Keanu only shrugged. "To me," he said softly, "it's just the right thing to do." There was no ego in his voice, no performance, just presence. And in that stillness, he started to open up. "I've lost a lot," he said. "When you lose people you love, when life shakes you to the core, you realize that none of this," he motioned around the studio, "none of it makes you better than anyone else." He spoke of his sister's battle with leukemia, of growing up without a father, of losing his partner, of burying a child, and the studio fell completely silent. Steve didn't interrupt. He just reached for the crucifix at his chest, subtly, instinctively, like a man grounding himself in something greater than words. "You talk about silence like it's familiar," Steve finally said. "It is," Keanu replied. "Silence has been my companion for a long time. But in that silence, sometimes I hear the clearest things." Then Steve asked him quietly, "You ever hear God in that silence?" And that's when it happened. Keanu paused, not dramatically, but deeply, as if searching for the most honest version of the truth. "Yes," he said, "I believe in something greater. I've questioned it. I've walked away from it. I've felt alone. But even in the darkest places, I could feel something, presence, a peace. Not always loud, not always comforting, but always there." And then, just when it felt like the moment had crested, Keanu leaned forward again. "Steve," he said, "can I tell you something I've never revealed in public?" This time, Steve didn't speak. He just nodded. Keanu took a breath. "There was a night, a few years ago. I was in a really dark place. Couldn't move, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wasn't even sure I wanted to be alive." The audience didn't make a sound. No fidgeting, no whispers, just stillness. "I was scrolling through my phone," Keanu continued, "trying to feel something, anything. And I came across a video. It was you, on stage, talking about purpose, about faith, about how God doesn't waste pain." Steve froze. "But it wasn't just what you said," Keanu added. "It was how you said it, like you'd lived it. And I remember thinking, this man believes in something bigger. Maybe I can too." Steve looked down at the cross on his chest, fingers tightening. "I watched that clip 3 times, Keanu said. "And the next morning, for the first time in weeks, I got out of bed." He sat back slowly, the memory visibly heavy. "I've never told anyone that, but I've carried your words with me ever since." Steve swallowed hard. His lips parted, but no words came. His eyes shimmered beneath the lights. "I just talked from the heart," he finally said. "I had no idea." "That's just it," Keanu said. "You didn't have to know. That's what made it real. You weren't trying to inspire me. You were just being yourself. And that saved me." There was no performance in the room anymore. No act. Just 2 men sitting in truth. "And that crucifix you wear?" Keanu added, eyes full of reverence. "It's not just a symbol. It's a sign. A message. You think you're just a comedian with faith, Steve. But I think you're something else." Steve looked at him, confused, open, emotional. "I think," Keanu said gently, "you're a minister in disguise." Steve swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words echo in his chest. It wasn't the first time someone had thanked him for an inspirational message, but this was different, deeper, almost frightening in its sincerity. A minister in disguise? His eyes darted to the studio audience. They were riveted, leaning forward, some with tears in their eyes. There was a moment where Steve's lips parted, like he wanted to respond, but couldn't. His hand slid over the crucifix again. He held it tightly, feeling its edges press into his palm. The crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. For a man famous for jokes, quick comebacks, and witty remarks, he suddenly had nothing to say. Keanu pressed on, voice calm yet urgent, like he was unearthing something sacred. "I've seen pastors who never step foot in a church," he said gently. "I've met preachers who never open a Bible. They just live the words, not with perfection, but with honesty. And I think you're one of them." Steve bowed his head. A quiet, trembling laugh slipped out. Maybe an attempt to diffuse the tension, maybe just shock. "Man," he said, voice uneven, "I'm just a comedian trying to get by, trying to make folks laugh, share what little wisdom I got." "That's exactly what makes it real," Keanu replied, not missing a beat. "You're not standing on a pulpit telling people how to live. You're sharing your own scars, hoping someone out there feels less alone. And that is ministry." At this, the audience erupted into gentle applause, a kind that felt more like reverence than excitement. Steve took a moment to collect himself, blinking back tears. When the applause died down, he finally said, "I don't even know what to say to that." "You don't have to say anything," Keanu said, leaning back. "You said it already, years ago. In that clip, you were talking about God, about how sometimes we think our struggles disqualify us from being used by Him. But you looked right in the camera and said, He doesn't always call the qualified. He qualifies the called." Steve exhaled, eyebrows knitted. "I remember that day," he said. "I was in a rough place myself, but the words just came out. Never guessed they'd matter to a guy like you." Keanu's response was soft, almost a whisper. "They matter to me more than you'll ever know." He let that sit for a moment, then continued. "And I've carried those words in my back pocket, even on days when I didn't believe in anything. Because I thought if a man like Steve Harvey, who's been through his own storms, can still look up and say there's a God that doesn't waste pain, maybe I can too." Steve wiped a single tear off his cheek with a pat of his thumb. "I just spoke from the heart that day. I didn't realize I was speaking to you." Sometimes, Keanu said, "You don't know who's in the dark waiting for a little light." At that, a hush fell again. The audience breathed in unison, every eye glistening. Then Steve cleared his throat, searching for stable ground. "Let me ask you, man, all those losses in your life, your daughter, your partner, your father leaving, you could have turned cold, could have lost your faith in people and good, but you didn't. Why?" Keanu paused. "Maybe I did. For a while. I was numb, quiet. Everything felt hollow. But you get to a point where the numbness is more terrifying than pain. Pain reminds you you're alive. Numbness just closes you off." He looked around at the audience, a gentle sweep of his gaze. "People see the YouTube videos of me giving away money or helping strangers, but really, I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me. Remind me I'm not alone." Steve nodded, understanding. "That's what we all need, right? A little hope." "Exactly," Keanu said. "And that's what you gave me that night. Hope. Not a sermon, not 1,000 Bible verses. Just one man speaking real about the heartbreak that shaped him and the God who never left." The crowd broke into applause again, bigger this time, louder, longer. Steve blinked, letting the moment wash over him. When the applause died down, he leaned forward, eyes locking onto Keanu's. "Does it feel strange," he asked, "to know you're out here saving other folks when deep down you're the one who felt so lost?" A subtle, melancholy smile touched Keanu's lips. "I don't think I'm saving anybody. If anything, I'm paying back the kindness life gave me, even when I didn't think I deserved it." Steve looked away for a second, collecting himself. His hand still gripped the crucifix, knuckles white. "I'll tell you what, man," he murmured. "You talking like this, it's got me feeling something in my own chest." He swallowed. "Maybe I gotta start listening to the words I said back then, too. Because I'll be honest, I forget sometimes." At that confession, Keanu's expression softened further. "We all forget," he said. "That's why we need each other's stories." Steve gave a small nod, lips pressed tight. "And you're telling me you found your faith again because of a random clip you saw of me?" Keanu exhaled slowly, almost trembling with memory. "I wouldn't say I found faith in you," he clarified. "I found faith in the possibility that God could still speak through broken people, through late-night phone scrolling, through unexpected places. That gave me enough reason to stand up again." Pause. The lights on set seemed dimmer, or maybe it was just the intensity of the moment. No one coughed, no one whispered, no one blinked too long for fear of missing the next word. Finally, Steve broke the silence. "You said something earlier about me being a minister in disguise. I don't know about that, man. I'm just a guy who messed up a lot, who learned some lessons the hard way." Keanu offered a gentle shrug. "Isn't that who God usually calls?" That line landed so heavily that Steve actually laughed, broken and soft. The audience exhaled too, half laughing, half crying. You might be right, Steve managed. He called Moses when Moses wasn't ready. Called Paul when Paul was out there persecuting folks. Called me when I was just trying to keep my head above water. Keanu smiled. There you have it. They sat in that mutual understanding for a beat, letting it breathe. Then Steve turned to the camera, something sparking in his eyes. A realization, or maybe a memory. He faced the crowd, voice steady despite the tears still clinging to his lashes. I don't know who's watching, he said. But maybe you're like Keanu was that night. Maybe you're hurting. Maybe you feel empty, and you're just scrolling through your phone, trying to find something, anything that'll make you believe it's worth getting up tomorrow. A hush rolled across the audience like a wave. Steve placed his free hand over the microphone, almost as if this was too private to amplify. Then he let his hand slide away and kept speaking anyway. If that's you, he said, I want you to hear this. You're not alone. This pain, it doesn't get to have the final word on you. You still have a purpose. If you're breathing, you've got something left to do. As he spoke, Keanu's head lowered, eyes closed. He was nodding, agreeing silently. Some people in the audience had tears on their cheeks. A few whispered, Amen. It was such a profound moment that the show's producers, for once, didn't cut to commercial or try to lighten the mood. They let it ride, because it was real. Steve looked back at Keanu, voice trembling. Sometimes, man, I wonder if I've done enough. If my words really matter. If my faith is strong enough to stand on. Hearing you say this, it's like God's telling me, see, Steve, even when you think you're just out here telling jokes, I'm using you. Keanu reached out, placing a gentle hand on Steve's arm. He used you to reach me, that's for sure. They locked eyes again, and the tension felt sacred, like a hush in a chapel. The audience was no longer separate. They were part of this moment, an invisible circle of souls witnessing two men lay down their armor. Then Keanu's voice dropped, taking on that same quiet intensity from before. And it's because of that, Steve, that I need to tell you something else. Something I never thought I'd say in front of all these people. Steve's brows lifted, surprise and curiosity mingling in his gaze. He didn't speak. He just nodded, bracing himself for another secret. Keanu inhaled through his nose, exhaled through his mouth, like someone about to dive underwater. I remember everything you said in that video, he began. But there was one line in particular that never left me. You said, sometimes you're not the one being rescued, you're the one doing the rescuing, and you don't even know it. Steve's lips parted, recognition flickering in his eyes. You said that, Steve. Keanu continued, voice quivering slightly. And at the time, you were talking about how you stumbled into comedy, how you thought it was just your way of making ends meet. But God turned it into a ministry, one joke at a time, one message at a time, one video clip at a time. A wave of emotion passed over Steve's face. He nodded, eyes bright with tears he no longer tried to hide. Keanu pressed on, and hearing that, it made me realize, maybe I wasn't just a broken man in a dark room. Maybe I was also someone who could rescue others someday, if I could just hold on long enough to see the other side of that pain. Somewhere in the audience, a muffled sob broke the silence. People were openly crying now, not out of sadness, but out of shared humanity. That's what you did for me, Keanu said. And if there's even one person out there, one lonely soul in the middle of the night who needs to hear this, I hope they hear it now. You're not alone. Your story matters. And yes, you might be broken, but that doesn't mean you can't be the one rescuing somebody else. A hush, then an exhale from the crowd, like everyone forgot to breathe and remembered at the same time. Steve took a moment. He pressed a hand to his chest, closed his eyes, and when he looked back at Keanu, the tears were still there, but so was a warm, unspoken gratitude. Brother, he said, voice thick with emotion, you have no idea what those words mean to me. Keanu smiled, gentle and reassuring. I think I do, he said quietly. They shared a look, one that went beyond talk show hosting and celebrity interviews. It was a look of mutual recognition, two people shaped by private pain, finding common ground in faith, hope, and the simple fact that neither story was over yet. The producers might have signaled for a break, but Steve lifted a hand to stop them. I need to keep going, he said, turning to the audience and the camera. I know this isn't our usual format, but sometimes real life knocks, and you got to open the door. The audience clapped lightly, but mostly they just listened. A sense of unity hung in the air, as if every person there realized they were part of something that transcended entertainment. Keanu, Steve began, turning back to him. I got one more question, and you don't have to answer if it's too personal, but I think a lot of folks at home might need to hear this. Keanu didn't hesitate. Asked. Steve's gaze dropped for a moment, searching for the right words. When you were at your lowest, when you didn't even want to see the morning light, what made you hold on A profound silence settled as Keanu folded his hands together in his lap, eyes drifting away, maybe into a memory that still ached. When he spoke, his tone was slow, deliberate. It wasn't one thing, he said. It was a series of small things that felt like lifelines. A friend checking in, an inspiring quote, the thought that my sister needed me, and then that clip of you reminding me that if I was still here, there was a reason. He paused, swallowing thickly. Sometimes we think we need a big miracle, but often it's the little signs that keep us going. Steve let out a breath. Man, that's so true. And I think that's how God speaks to most of us, Keanu added. In those tiny moments, through random videos at 3 a.m., through a friend's text, through a total stranger's kindness. He shifted in his seat, pressing both palms to his thighs, as though grounding himself. It doesn't matter what you've done or what's been done to you. If you're still breathing, your story isn't over. That's what I believe. Steve nodded, tears threatening again. Thank you for saying that, brother. For real. The moment lingered, rich and full, before Steve turned to the audience. Y'all okay out there? He asked, half laughing through his tears. The crowd cheered in a gentle roar, supportive, emotional, reverent. Some waved, some clapped, some reached out as if they wanted to just hug both men on that stage. Steve took a breath, then said, "We're supposed to cut to break, but I don't want to lose this moment. So if it's all right with you, Keanu, maybe we could do something we don't normally do." Keanu tilted his head, curious. Sure. Steve nodded, swallowing nervously. Let's just pray right here, right now. A quiet gasp of surprise rippled through the audience. It wasn't standard daytime talk show protocol to have a live prayer, but no one moved to stop him. Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'd love that," he said, voice faint with emotion. Steve rested a hand on Keanu's shoulder, then bowed his head. Those in the audience who felt comfortable joined in, heads lowered in a hush that felt almost holy. Steve spoke softly, each word trembling with sincerity. "Lord, we come to you, two broken men who've lived through pain and somehow found each other in the darkness. Thank you for the reminder that none of us are ever truly alone. Thank you for using people, even when we don't think we're worthy. Thank you for using us, even when we've got nothing but scars." He paused, voice quavering. Keanu squeezed his hand gently. "And God," Steve continued, "if there's anyone watching this, anyone feeling like they're at the end of their rope, let them see this moment and remember that hope is real. Let them remember that if they're still breathing, it ain't over." Amen. A soft chorus of amen echoed through the studio. The audience broke into applause, a sound that resonated with relief, release, love. Some people were openly weeping, hugging each other. The cameraman and crew stood silent, cameras rolling, tears on more than one face. Steve stood up slowly, and Keanu followed. They embraced. No theatrics, no pat on the back, just a genuine hug that spoke volumes more than words could. When they pulled apart, the applause soared, filling the studio with a kind of thunder that doesn't come from mere excitement, but from hearts collectively moved. Catching his breath, Steve looked at the camera, voice trembling. "I don't know if we even got a show after this, folks, but if we ended right here, I'd say we did something good today." Laughter rippled through the crowd, warm and affectionate. Keanu gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Steve," he said, "for listening, for being open to this conversation." Steve shook his head. "Man, I'm the one who's thankful. Hearing your story, it reminded me that God is in the details. He's working in ways we don't even see." They both turned toward the audience, who began a standing ovation. A few seconds passed, then Steve, ever the host, lifted a hand to quiet them, though his voice was still thick with emotion. "Before we close out," he said, "I just want to say, if you're watching this at home or on your phone in the middle of the night, and you feel like you've got nothing left, please remember this conversation. Remember Keanu's words. Remember the reason you're still here. And if you can't find a reason, borrow ours until you do. You matter." He glanced at Keanu, who was nodding in agreement. Because if a man like Keanu Reeves, who's seen more loss than most of us can fathom, can find a way to stand back up, then baby, so can you. The applause roared again, but it was more than applause. It was an affirmation, a collective outpouring of unity and hope. Steve and Keanu waved to the crowd, eyes shining. When the show finally cut to commercial, the cameras lingered just long enough to capture the two men turning toward each other for one more quiet embrace, hearts full of gratitude. And hours after the taping ended, snippets of the interview began to surface online. Social media lit up with messages from people who'd stumbled onto the clip in their own late-night scrolling. Comments poured in, "I needed this. This came exactly the right time. I've never heard a talk show so raw and honest before." And that's the beauty of it. One conversation between two souls willing to be vulnerable became a beacon for countless others. In an age of quick sound bites and stage publicity stunts, something real had broken through. Keanu Reeves had come on the Steve Harvey Show as a Hollywood icon. He left as a fellow traveler on the road of faith, pain, and hope. A man who reminded the world that if you're still breathing, there's a reason. And Steve Harvey, the comedian with a cross on his chest, stood revealed as more than just a man telling jokes. He was, in the words of Keanu Reeves, a minister in disguise. Because sometimes ministry looks like a sermon in a church. Sometimes it looks like a late-night comedic monologue. And sometimes it looks like an unexpected confession on daytime TV that leaves an entire studio in reverent silence. Wherever it happens, whenever it happens, the message rings the same. Your story isn't over yet. Don't you dare give up. That day on the Steve Harvey Show, two lives intersected in a way no scriptwriter could have planned. And for those watching, maybe scrolling on their phone late at night, maybe searching for a lifeline in the quiet, this moment became proof that faith can find you anywhere. It might be hidden in a random video clip or nestled in a single line you needed to hear. So if you're ever wondering whether your little spark of hope can light someone else's darkness, just remember, you never know who's watching, who's scrolling, who's desperate for a reason to stand up again. Your pain, your survival, might be the very thing that rescues someone else. Even if you think you're just telling jokes or making small talk, it might be ministry in disguise. Because in the end, we're all ministers in some form or fashion, carrying our scars, sharing our truths, showing up with whatever flicker of faith we have left. And sometimes, all it takes is one person's raw honesty to remind another that life is still worth living. So keep speaking from the heart, keep carrying that light, no matter how small it seems. Because someone somewhere is waiting for your story to help them find their own. And that's the real gift of moments like these, the gift of hope passed from one stranger to another, like a candle flame that refuses to burn out. If you found this story powerful, share it with someone who might need a reminder that they're not alone. A single spark can light 1,000 candles. Sometimes all we need is one honest voice to remind us we still have a reason to get up tomorrow.